Alright, might as well go ahead and get started. Let's see, I did have one follow-up this week from some discussion several weeks back. There was a bug where some of our hosted content had disappeared. I think it was in an S3 bucket and it stopped working. So things like the skeleton.zip examples have disappeared. I think that's fixed now. So if anybody wants to try to use that stuff again, and let us know if there's a problem. I think that should be okay now. Yeah. Okay, good. Other than that, just plugging along with the usual stuff. The Bakes on Mesh project is, I think, approaching the point of getting some internal testing against the resolution limit increase. So that's a viewer change and a bake service change. So that'll be getting looked at on the development grids pretty soon, and if all goes well, working its way up the ladder to actual visibility at some point. Other than that, still working on animated objects. We've been getting the wireframe stuff and the selections to work correctly. Doing some testing on things like region crossings. I think one question we've had on those is whether you can sit on these animated objects. Basically, you can. There's not any special restriction on that. The catch is that if the thing is animated, then your sit point isn't also getting animated. So unless the object is actually sort of designed to keep the sit area stationary relative to the object, you're going to get kind of weird effects where the object will kind of shimmy out from underneath you or something. Yeah, we've got bug 1000864, which is, we still might look into something in that category, but it's not likely to be going in the initial project viewer. I don't have anything along those lines yet. I am hoping to get, unless there aren't any major snags, I am hoping to get the animated objects as attachments working. That seems like kind of a basic use case. Everyone's going to want to do that with pets and such, but haven't done very much with that so far. It's still to be worked on. Yeah, okay, I think that would be a problem if you wanted to have like a mounted rider. There is a proposal. Lucia posted the link for it to allow sort of more complex ways of synchronizing avatars with animated objects, and so that's that's still up for discussion. But in the current work, it's not in there yet. Hey, I don't tell people how to use them. Question about how physics will work. It basically should work the same way that it works with non-animated objects today, but we haven't really looked at it much so far. the rigged meshes themselves aren't physical in the sense that the motion that your avatar goes through when you're animating your skeleton doesn't collide with things and doesn't trigger physical events. Yeah. So anyway, we're I guess basically an open Q&A here. If anybody has questions or wants to toss out ideas, we can talk about it. If they don't, we can have a short meeting, whatever works for you guys. Yeah, I'm not betting on a short meeting. We haven't had any lately. Let's see. There's a question about with animated mesh, can we scale? We're not going to have support for scaling by sliders, if that's what you mean. Supporting things like sliders is something that I'm hoping we'll be looking at in a follow-on project, but it's not part of the initial animated objects release. One thing I'm kind of hoping we can find a consistent way to implement is allowing scaling based on the scale of the object itself, so that you could make like 3 different sizes of the same rigged mesh object, and then they would kind of scale to, and the skeleton would kind of scale to match. That's not anything that happens sort of automatically, because right now, basically everything is driven by the skeleton rather than by the mesh. So the skeleton kind of is the size that it is unless you change it using joint positions. So that means that things don't tend to, the scale of the original object basically gets thrown away when you start doing rigging with it. I think there are ways that we could potentially do that, but it needs to work in a kind of a consistent and predictable way. So I think we still need to do a bit of tweaking on that before it can really be a viable feature. Yeah, the whole business with body shapes it gets into a much larger project. To really get that to work right, you need to have some equivalent to the current outfit folder for animated objects, which means that you need to be able to take shapes, wearables, and things, run them to the baking service, use that to produce the slider values, also use that to produce the bakes, then apply the bakes onto the mesh, which requires the bakes on mesh project to be done, and so forth and so on. So I think that's all really good stuff, and I think that we will do that at some point, but I don't think that that's definitely not part of the initial kind of minimum feature spec for just getting objects to animate in the first place. So it's we're not rejecting doing it, but it's not coming with the first batch of changes. I'm not sure what you mean by only as the basic skeleton, Lucia. Yeah, you do have the full bento skeleton, so you've got the full set of bones, and you have the ability to support joint position. So um, that stuff all carries over sort of from an avatar into an animesh very very simply. The part that you don't have right away is the body shape stuff, which is kind of part of the follow on. Yeah, well, as we've said, Lucia, as we've said, the initial purpose of this first uh, project is just to get the ability to do animations on objects at all. I think the most useful use cases for this initial stuff is going to be for things like pets, where you're not trying to match, a set of human-related parameters. It doesn't get you all the way to full NPCs, and that's a follow-on project. If we have to wait until the Bakes on Mesh project is done, which we kind of would, plus some additional extensions to do baking of objects, you're definitely looking at a much longer time horizon for getting anything out there. And really the goal here is to have something that you can iterate on. If there's, if we're just talking about kind of features for a couple of years before anything is ever actually out there to test, then um, there's a much greater risk that stuff just doesn't work the way we intend. We're not really meeting the right feature set, and there's also just the fact that nobody can use it for that much longer. So we're not trying to do a full implementation of everything in the first pass. Whirly, I don't know any reason that Axon would fail to build. That's what I'm using for my viewer builds. However, it's not going to be useful to you unless you're in a region that supports the sim side extensions. The whole business of animating objects requires a new message to be sent from the server, and so it's not going to do anything until you're in a region that knows how to send those messages. So if you have some questions about land impact, we're aware of the issues. We don't have any land impact calculations related to animated objects yet. What we'll probably wind up doing for that is, when we go to Project Viewer, we will have some kind of placeholder value where we just, we make up some land impact value just so that we can verify that, things are getting charged differently for animated meshes, and then, in terms of tweaking what the actual land impact calculation should be, you'll be refining that more through testing and through feedback as more people create content and test it, you know, run it through its paces in our test regions. It could be as simple as, well, you pay an extra however much for an animated object in the land impact, but if the performance numbers tell us we need to do something more complicated, then we'll, as you know, we're not afraid of doing things that are complicated. Let's see. Beck asks, can I double check what you've said so far? An animesh does not affect the bounding box, but we can use an animation to alter the scale of a mesh. Well, I mean, there is, I think, some kind of a residual hack that lets people do some kinds of scale-related effects in animations, but that's not actually intentional. When I was talking about trying to have scales for objects, I was talking about just having a static scale based on the scale of the originally thing that's being rigged. So you could make a large cat and a small cat and turn them both into rigged objects. Then they would animated objects. Then they would continue to be different sizes when they were animated. But if we do that, then we would want the bounding box to actually correspond to that. It's not intended to be a workaround to let the bounding box be different. So yeah, the line impact should represent the actual visible scale of the object. I know there's already some issues with that today, among other things. Various issues related to LODs and bounding boxes, but the intent would be that it actually does correspond.
Is there any word on animating or rigging attachment points to attach two attachment points?
In what context?
Well, you said that at one of the last meetings that they weren't in sync. How the server treats it and how the viewer treats it are different.
I mean, there's attachment points two different ways, right? There's being able to attach an animated object to an avatar's attachment point, right? And then there's going the other way, basically being able to attach, avatars or static objects to attachment points of the animated objects themselves. The piece of that we're going to be looking at first is being able to support animated objects as attachments. So you can have a dancing squirrel on your head or something like that, which I'm sure is the main application people are interested in. But the being able to do it the other way around is going to require a more complicated process to look into, and so far we haven't done anything new with that.
Well, that's all good to know, but I was talking more about what we can do now. I know that before I've said that I'm now not really for allowing us to rig to attachment points like people were doing in the past before Bento. But as I've been doing more work with accessories and things for this cat, it seems like the only real proper way to rig an attachment.
Oh, sorry, you're talking about rigging to attachment points. Yeah, I think what we concluded there was that there's just a bug in our viewer that's prohibiting rigging to attachment points, but that the simulator allows it, so that if you're uploading from Firestorm, it'll work. But what's the application area where you're needing to where you find yourself needing to rig to attachment points in a fresh out of the box design?
Well, any time, it always comes down to where the object is going to sit. So there's situations where you might want something in your hand, but then you might also want it to animate, and you have to know um, uh, the default position in an attachment point is perfect for being in that hand or wherever the attachment point is. So it's just that when you're animating, you know where the object actually is relative to some other part. So that's what it really comes down to. And yes, you could, a creator could not rig it and just, attach it in second life like you would attach anything, which is fine for many cases. But I find that a lot of these larger companies that want to have a little bit more control over their products, rigging is a better option because then the customer can't do anything else with it. And
Yeah.
where it needs to be, you don't have to guess which point or anything like that.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I think it, both because there are legitimate uses for this and because there's legacy content that people want to be able to continue to update. It probably does make sense to continue to support rigging to attachment points. The usage here that I'm most concerned with, but it's really up to the individual designers, whether they go along with this, is that if you treat the attachment points as just kind of free-floating bones that can go anywhere, then it makes them sort of not useful as attachment points. And that was kind of how rigging to attachment points was originally being used. But yeah, at this point, basically the fact that we don't allow that to be uploaded is just a bug. I've got it on the list of things to fix for the for the animated objects project, and so we'll be fixing that, and you will be able to upload meshes that are rigged to attachment points.
Yeah, I know. Originally, I was very much against it, but for very much the same reason that you were talking about. But now that I'm playing, normally I'm not making a lot of attachments or toys and stuff for my creatures, and I did have to do it for this, and it just makes a lot more sense to rig it to the attachment point versus just
Yeah, well, it's
possibly
legitimate
having
to
the
do.
customer do something weird with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a legit thing to do. If you have to use Firestorm to upload it for now, that's fine. But we will try to get that fixed so that the behavior is consistent on our viewer as well. Let's see. This question about releasing dev kits for the default mesh avatars. Not that I'm aware of. I'm not really involved in creating those, so it's a thing that makes sense to bring up, but I don't have any particular knowledge of anything along those lines right now. You're talking about the starter avatars that you can pick when you first log in, or by going to the avatar chooser, right?
Right. It's just, I always thought it was a little strange that we're offering mesh services like, hey, you can create this with mesh, you can make mesh avatars, but there's no real example on how to build on these avatars aside from having people go buy it from somebody else and then hope they get the dev kit from that. So I tried to look at maybe we can use the default avatars that come with this that are like in the library. So, and not only do they not have a dev kit, but they're not even mod. I just don't think that that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I would like to see us have more sample content, dev kits to help people get started, because the barrier to entry here is as you guys all know, is super high. You got to have to learn a lot and jump through a lot of hoops to successfully do stuff.
Well, wait.
Obviously it's better for everybody if it's easier to to learn how to do that and to have some kind of good examples to start out from.
Yeah, exactly. And Topo, even back in the day when they had free avatars with the like legacy stuff, they had free hair and textures and stuff in there for you to learn how to do stuff with. That's what the library was for. At least that's what my understanding is.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that the dev kit would probably be more useful than having modifiable objects, and I don't know the kind of policy decision behind wanting things to be no mod. I know that they decided to make the shapes modify because, of course, you have to have that to do any kind of appearance editing at all. Um, but
Yeah, but you can't create if you don't know how to or they don't give you an example to do. It's like, hey, go bake that cake, but you got to go and buy the materials and look it up yourself rather than saying, hey, here's some materials. So now you can see how the cake is made and make one yourself.
Problem with doing that is that you would end up with a lot more people creating, but if all they had was a basic tutorial and then thought that's all they needed, they could end
Oh
up just
no.
flooding the market with utter garbage. That
Well,
ended
at
up
least
being
it gives them a
particularly
chance to
laggy.
start. I don't think that's fair to be like, well, if we're just gonna flood it with garbage. It's, at least it's getting
Well,
them
no,
to
it's
go in
just
that gate, and it's like a
it was
starting point.
just an example. If you set in the if you set in the gate too low, like not even not sort of giving out guidelines for sort of what is good, what isn't good. What might be useful is sort of like a best practices thing. So what works well in Second Life, what doesn't work well. Because as far as
Probably
actual
would be a
tutorials for creating, there's already better tutorials than anything they're going to come out with on YouTube already.
It does kind of seem like it would be a good idea to have, like, on the texture uploader screen, have a link to just, like, a web page that says best practices and that type of stuff. Because I know I used to upload 2048 textures all the time.
I didn't even know you couldn't use 4K textures until recently.
yeah, getting best practices better understood. I think is a challenge. I mean, it's hard to mix the just basic documentation for okay, these are the controls, this is what they do with sort of more complicated presentations of best practices. But
That's
yeah,
what we were saying with the whole
if we could make that sort of thing more discoverable and better documented, that would be a big win.
maybe make it so you can't upload anything until you've gone through a bit of a tutorial area.
Oh no! Don't
So
start that crap. So we do with Mesh. God, I hate that stupid tutorial. Just let me upload it.
yeah, it would be a pain in the ass for anyone who already knows how to do it, but it would kind of it might at least it'd help people a lot who don't already know what they're doing. If they go through a tutorial, it's like this is a good thing, this is a bad thing. Don't do this, do the other one. That kind of thing. Sort of how the cost is calculated as well would be useful.
Exactly.
No, they'd have to
It
actually
would
they'd have
be
to
like
actually
that.
go through. They'd
Click,
actually
or yes, yes, no, no. We're done. Upload.
test on the thing, so they get it
And then
wrong.
people are going to still do what they want to do. So that's kind of
Well, yeah,
waste.
but then but then the people who are actually going to do something, actually want to do something decent, are going to be better able to do it quicker. They're less likely to be discouraged by awkwardness.
I think it'd be really neat if there was
Yeah, then you're all has to go through
more
that
ways
quiz
for.
again. See, annoying. I'm just saying there should be. We already have the resource here. It's free. Why not offer a kit for it so you can further customize that free avatar? That's all I want. Nothing.
I think it'd be neat if that was the case. I think that there should be more ways for people to start creating immediately. Like, I love Mesh to bits. Mesh is amazing, and people have created some beautiful things in World. but it has made SL creation, in my opinion, a lot more elitist. Like years ago, before we had mesh, people would just get on and create with prims, and then if you wanted move to sculpts and blah 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 blah. But everybody now immediately wants mesh immediately, and like with how long it takes to get good at mesh, like a lot of people I know that want to create are discouraged because of
Yeah,
that, and
that's what I
because
was
there's
saying.
no
Like, and if
easy
we
thing
can't
for them
have the
to
dev
start
kits
with.
for, at least make it mod. I'm sure somebody would do like we did with the default system avatars and create a skin sheet for it, and then it would just go on from there. Jeez. It's not like you're losing money to make it.
How much does it really buy you to have
Now,
a mesh object that's
yeah,
mod?
I
I
mean,
mean, it's basically just it's just an ID that points to this blob of data that has a bunch of triangles and stuff in it. It's not
kind of
like it
hard to
lets you
say that
actually go in and
want to
edit
go
all
bake
the
a cake.
individual triangles.
Come into a game that says, "Hey, come here, make all kinds of cakes," and you're like, "Okay, let's make that cake." And here's a cake that you can have, but we're not going to tell you you can't modify this cake, or we don't give you the file so you can see how this cake is made. How to make this cake? No, you can't edit the default mesh.
Sorry, what were you saying, Veer? I didn't catch that.
Which is absolutely ridiculous. Especially since it's already free. I mean, it's not like you're losing money off of it. Which has been you guys' main argument. Like, I don't want to offer it mod, I'm going to lose money. No, it's already free. So, what's the problem?
Yeah, no, my question was just how much you actually gain by having, mod ability. I can certainly see a dev kit is useful, but I mean, mod ability doesn't actually let you edit the mesh. Some people were pointing out that it does let you do things like add scripts, which makes sense. And of course, you'll also need
Was there
mod
any
ability
way
to be able to set
that's
things into Animesh or whatever.
bulletin? Hey, creators, we want to create a brand new mesh avatar so everybody can learn how to do this thing. Is there anybody that want to donate their time or creation skills here to help us create a brand new avatar?
Specifically, the biggest thing with mesh
Yeah, of
bodies
course,
being
because
no mod
everybody
is
goes
that it
by money. So if it's
prevents
not
you
getting
from being
paid,
able
who cares about
to
progress or
unlink
anybody
all
else?
of the excess layers that you don't need. Like,
This is easier for
Sorry,
us
say
to
it again about
complain about it
unlinking the
instead of
base
people doing
layers.
things wrong.
if you've ever looked at any avatars from Beliza or Maitreya, they are like over 1,000,000 polygons each, but they're not that bad if you were to remove like the clothing layer and the tattoo layer and so on and so forth. But you can't because they're no mod.
Well, I mean, when you're looking at one of these things, in a you're not talking about like in a baked context. You're talking about with an actual mesh avatar.
Yeah, just with stuff that currently exists. Once the baking
Right.
server, then I suppose there isn't that much need for modify type stuff as long as the mesh makers make it reasonable to replace the textures.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Whatever the merits of modifiability, it should be the case that the bakes on mesh lets you make more efficient content, and it of course being able to do bakes on mesh also gives you the ability to extend the texturing of objects that you don't have modify permissions for, right? You say, okay, well, I'm wearing this shirt. Now that shirt is appearing as part of your baked texture that appears on that mesh. Even though you didn't actually modify the mesh itself. So, I think it should simplify appearance changes for mesh objects as well. All right, we had a lot of scrolling going on while we were talking. Did I miss anybody's question? Feel free to pop it up here again, and I'll respond to anybody I haven't responded to yet.
I have a question going back to Animesh. It's just a quick one. I'm wondering about its. I've heard about everybody obviously saying, I want to make a cat, I want to make a squirrel. I'm curious about its potential for game design in worlds. Say, obviously we could do NPCs, but could we do, say, spell abilities where you'd have chains that bend and wrap around and warp around people, or could we use it to make the environment more interactable with, say, if a wall gets hit, it kind of bends and warps out of shape and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Certainly, part of the motivation behind this was being able to make more interactive environments. You could certainly it would certainly be easy to have something like you put a bird up in a tree, or you have the tree itself waving its limbs around or something like that, and add that kind of motion. Some of those things are more complicated, like if you want chains that are going to kind of follow along with someone's body or whatever. Since our animated objects don't really have physics to them, you can't do anything sort of super complicated with draping clothing or having things maintaining contact in a kind of a complex way. So I think you're certainly going to run into some limitations there, but certainly you can have features of the scenery that are animated objects and that can do their can then play animations, causing various kinds of motions to happen.
Is there going to be any limit to the number of animated objects a person can put out in a sim, or will that be pretty much unlimited?
Yeah. Well, there will certainly be limits. We don't know what they are yet. We really have to get better data on the performance impact to know what's reasonable. But clearly, an animated object is imposing more of a load than a static object.
But would it be imposing more of a load than, say, a script animated prim object doing the same thing?
It probably depends on the object, and we'd have to look at it, kind of item by item, and try to come up with something reasonable. Basically, we have to be guided by the performance aspects, and there's various possible hooks that we could have for tweaking this. You can adjust the land impact. You could have a specific limit for animated objects per person. You could have a specific limit for number of animated objects attached to an avatar. Certainly it's going to affect the avatar rendering cost if it's attached to an avatar. So there's various pieces that we have to come up with something that's at least reasonable, to to avoid kind of a runaway population problem.
Yeah, I suppose it would be a bit of a problem if everyone's running around with an entire army of animated objects behind them.
Yeah, yeah, you really can't have a 12-person posse accompanying everybody as they go around. There's also a question about imposters. I think we're going to want to get imposters working. I haven't looked at it yet. So in the current prototype, there's no impostering, but that is a performance tweak that we have available for avatars, and it probably makes sense to have it for Animesh as well. Well, it's growing on me.
I did have a question, and forgive me if, I know we've talked about this a number of times in the past, but getting back to Bento and expressions that get triggered, I still don't quite understand if we can override, choose a new animation for our walks. Why can't we choose a new animation for our frowns or smiles? Why can't it work the exact same way as our AO stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the limitation right now is that the animation overrides are being applied at the system level based on the locomotion graph that's managed by the simulator, right? So the simulator knows whether you're walking or running or flying or a few other things, and then based on that, it says, oh, well, you're supposed to be playing, this animation. You're supposed to be playing the walk animation or the run animation or whatever. And so the AO substitutes something else at that level. So it says, well, if you decide I'm supposed to be running, instead of playing this one animation, play this other animation instead. Now, with something like frowning, the system doesn't know that you're frowning, right? It it knows that you said I want to play, an animation with this particular ID or whatever, but it doesn't know that that's a frown animation. So it doesn't have the ability to swap it with something else. One of the extensions we've talked about for animations is, and I think we've probably talked about this in previous meetings, was to add the notion of kind of user-defined state. So you could say, well, okay, there is such a thing as a frowning state, and when I'm in it, I want to be playing, this animation, and then, then whenever you say, okay, I'm frowning, then it's going to play whatever animation has been associated with that. That's, excuse me a second. That's something that it would definitely be possible to do, and I think when we get to the stage of doing some animation extensions, that's one of the things we're going to want to look at, but it's just not something that we have the capability to do yet.
So that's what it is. It's not like a running state that gets updated. And that's why the default frown or smiling animation, that trigger can't work the same way. So that's what you're saying. But it can. Right. But we can make it work that way, you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are ways to get the same effects with other kinds of state besides the pieces that the simulator already knows about, but we just don't have the hooks for it yet.
So let me get this right, if I understand this. So currently, a couch or something, or anything you would sit on, anything someone would make, let's say it calls a default smile or something, the system that you're describing could take that existing couch and swap out the animation. Well, I'm just saying that there are people want things to automatically work. You know, so and there are already existing things out there that call these specific animations that are default Second Life animations. They're not specifically states like walking or standing would be, but if we use those specific animations or default animations, just use their wording and change that within the system, then it could work the same way.
Yeah, I mean, there is some additional complexity with things that are morph based. I see we've had some discussion about that in chat. Playing animations to position uh, skinned objects around uh, is one way to alter shapes and actual morphs that are only defined for the system avatar are something else. So um, we basically going forward, it's what you're going to be seeing is more of the skin stuff. We don't really have a way to generalize the morphs to things other than system avatar. But there's all kind of weird places where we're kind of combining the two of them. Animations can reference hand poses, which are actually morph based. I think we had some discussion about that, and sliders can affect both bone position, which affects the shape of skinned things, and can also affect the behavior of the values of various morphs, which only work on system avatar. So there's a lot of kind of complexity there.
Yeah, this was just something that came up in the forums, and I thought now that Bento's out and everything, like before, I just didn't want to think about it because to me it was another thing that was going to slow everything down.
Yeah, under the hood, what's going on with morphs is not super complicated. You're basically just sort of interpolating between different sets of vertex positions, but it all depends on having predefined sets of positions and sets of things that can be adjusted. So the only place we use those currently is with the built-in system avatar, which is kind of its own thing. It completely predates our support for uploadable meshes. The skinning is implemented in even a different way. It's really kind of its own beast, going back to the kind of very very early days of SL.
Something to mention about all these morphs and shape key stuff is that in DAZ Studio, you can trade morphs. So you can create a morph and then trade it. I know that would be something that would be difficult to do in Second Life, but that would be a super cool feature in any world. I mean, be able to create your own, to alter your own avatar mesh and then trade it around. That would be a pretty huge thing. So like sell a slider, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. That would be really neat. It's probably obvious why we haven't done that yet, because it would be a extremely massive project, but it you could certainly do a lot of cool stuff with it once you had it. You notice that even the whole notion of what sliders we have is completely static now, right? There's basically a bunch of configuration files that come with the viewer that say, what the different sliders are and what they mean. So, making that sort of extensible on the fly would be some work at the UI and that level, as well as just allowing the 3D content itself to be authored and traded. Polysale, I would say that we probably don't need to worry too much about the ordering of those projects at this point, since they're substantial distance down the line. Adjustable walk run speed. So you want to be able to basically change how fast you're moving in world when you're walking and running, as well as kind of how the corresponding animations then get played back. Yeah, I don't know the values, but I'm pretty sure they're fixed quantities that are managed on the server. Basically the simulator decides, okay, you're moving at this speed, tracked at the physics level and everything, and then that stuff gets communicated to the viewer, saying, okay, well, you were here and now you're there. But I think if besides having to do that, you'd probably need to have more animations as well, wouldn't you? I think just playing the existing run animation faster or slower isn't necessarily going to look good over a wide range of speeds.
You could let us adjust the speed of the animation.
Yeah, but I mean, if with walk and run, there's also special code in the viewer that tries to keep your foot from sliding when you're moving, and that stuff would have to follow along as well. So how would that work? You want to have like an LSL command that lets you change the speed that a given animation is playing?
Oh yeah, that would be super useful and very cool. Go into Matrix slow-mo.
Yeah, doing a pure tweak of how fast a given animation is playing would probably be easier, because that stuff is all just happening on the viewer side. But yeah, so what are the applications? This is the first time somebody's asked for this, so I'm curious what it would buy us to have it.
Biggest, most obvious one is letting people sync up their walking speeds with larger or smaller avatars.
Yes, that's definitely it, and especially with this cat, I would do a special one for the cat. But a very common thing that I get, every week is, can you make this animation faster or slower or whatever? just the ability to do that would save me a lot of time and energy. Think of people who want like combat animation and they want it like super fast versus like an actual realistic swing of a sword.
Or the people who make movies and want to get that shot one more time, but just a little bit slower.
Yeah, I mean, just tweaking the playback rate on animations, I don't think is super hard. I think the parts where it gets more complicated are, if you're trying to keep your kind of ground contact fix up stuff working correctly, or if you're changing the simulator side definitions of what your movement speed is supposed to be. I think that gets you into a bit more complicated territory. Worley, is there a
Already
is there a
watching.
UI control for tweaking animations now? I see there's a link to this Jira proposing a slow walk. You need different UI for that too, wouldn't you? So you've got some way to control whether you're walking at regular speed or walking slowly.
Think about it for these animeshes too, or NPCs. For pathfinding, the speeds are not always. You could actually even have an animal get up to speed, start at a certain speed and end at a different speed. So to be able to change the speed of the animation would probably be even more important for an NPC than humans.
Yeah, I mean the simplest thing would just be to have an LSL command saying, you know, maybe when you call LL Play Animation, you have an additional field that says the playback rate or something. If you're trying to change it on the fly, where you're playing the same animation, but you want to tweak the playback rate dynamically, then I guess that would get a little more complicated. You need to be able to specify the existing animation and then say, okay, change its speed to this much.
I'm not for complete animation reform. I think there's a certain simplistic beauty about Second Life's animation system.
Yeah, I guess complete reform would be a bit more ambitious. Yeah, I guess we're a little over time, aren't we? All right. Well, good suggestion. We have an existing project to do, various animation extensions. Probably coming online after we get the project viewer out for the animated object support. So, I can add something to that to kind of revisit it at that point as soon as possible. Whirly, you know the story. All right. Well, I'll see you guys later. Next month we're going to have a kind of a sparse schedule for the meetings. As usual, we're out for the first Thursday of the month, which is next week, beginning of August. Then we'll have a meeting the following week on the 10th, and then we'll be out. I think the meetings will be out for a couple of weeks after that because I'll be out on vacation, and then we'll be starting up again on August 31st. So I put all of that in the content creation user group wiki, which I will post if somebody hasn't beaten me to the punch already. There. So that's all in there. Anyway, we'll have a few weeks in August when we're not meeting, and I will see you guys the other weeks.
See you, Beer.
Well.
Hey, before everyone runs away, does anyone have any good advice